Yo, what's up guys? In this video, I'm gonna be explaining literally everything you need to know about positive EV betting. So I give out, tons of bets on social media, Twitter, live stream, and you've probably heard me talk about positive EV betting. But what I wanted to do in this video is kind of give a full tutorial, like everything I think you need to know about positive EV betting. This is a data-driven strategy, from why it works, the math behind it, everything like that, to ultimately specific settings you should use. What books should you be devigging to? What sports books are sharp and for what markets? What are the minimum and maximum odds that you place for positive EV bets? So positive EV betting, it's an amazing strategy. What's better than making money betting on sports? If you can get an edge and win long term, then sports betting is a lot of fun. The sports betting industry gets a lot of negative press, but if you can actually learn how to get an edge and be a profitable sports bettor, what's more fun than placing bets and making money? And that's what we're going to go through in this video. So if you're new to this channel, my name's Alex. And I started sports betting probably like 6 years ago. I was a quant trader working on the Pennsylvania-New Jersey border. Sports betting legalized in the US. Pennsylvania and New Jersey, were two of the first states. Now sports betting's in a lot more states. At the time, Pennsylvania and New Jersey were the first two states to kind of legalize online sports betting. So I started to kind of talk to people, other traders who I worked with about, hey, we do a lot of complex trading strategies. We make money trading on natural gas, derivatives, calls and puts. Can any of these strategies work for sports betting? And I kind of learned about positive EV betting and spent a ton of time researching it. And ultimately now it's the main sports betting strategy that I use. Since I started using this bet tracker called Pikkit, where you can actually follow me on Pikkit to see all my plays, I've made like 700 grand in the past few years since I've started sports betting. Most of that profit is from positive EV betting, and hopefully you learned something in this video. So without further ado, let's kind of get into positive EV betting. So let's start out by going through the basics. If you've never heard the term positive EV, you may be like, yo, what does this word mean? It's a kind of weird word, but it's really simple. And I promise anyone can use this strategy to become a better sports bettor and make more money off the books. So basically what positive EV betting is, and I'll give you a simple example, is you're using the odds on every sports book out there. There's hundreds of sports books. You're using the odds on other books to find profitable bets on the book you use. So I'll give you an example. I use FanDuel Sportsbook. It's a book I've used for years now. I just locked in over 8.5 runs in Tigers Blue Jays at minus 105 odds. The price you're getting really matters. So I'm getting this at minus 105 on FanDuel, when all these other books have this priced around minus 120. So every sports book, that's the reason why positive EV betting works in sports betting, is the market is so fragmented. Hundreds of sports books have launched in the US. They're all trying to set their own unique odds. So the market's extremely fragmented and inefficient. And it's really basic sports betting advice. You've probably heard me talk about line shopping. You want to make sure every bet you lock in, you're getting the best possible odds relative to any other sports book. So this, positive EV betting, it's unique to sports betting. Like, this doesn't work in the stock market. Facebook stock is currently about $640. You're going to see the same price for Facebook on E-Trade, Robinhood, Fidelity, any other brokerage account. It's one price. The market is super efficient. Whereas in sports betting, it's the opposite. Sports betting just legalized. The market's super inefficient. All these books, are setting their own unique odds. And that's why it's a great time to be sports betting, period. But anyways, what you'll notice on FanDuel is the only sports book that has the under 8.5 runs favored, right? They're giving you worse odds on the under. They have the under as a minus 115 favorite. Every other sports book, right? It may just seem like a book. Who cares what other sports books, are saying? All the other books, though, are actually data points. every other sports book, including sharp books like Bet Online, have the over favored. So I'm using the odds on other sports books to identify profitable bets on FanDuel, and FanDuel is a book that I use. So every book is a data point. Odds mean something. And you can kind of think about it. I mean, a stock price signifies something too. Like, you may just think, okay, Facebook is currently at about $640. Who cares? It's just a number. You know, people are just gambling around in the stock market. But a stock price actually implies the valuation of the company, right? The stock price represents what is the market cap, what is the value of the company. You just have to multiply, the stock price times the number of shares. So in this case, Facebook is currently $640 approximately. That implies a market cap of 1.6 trillion. So basically the stock price, if Facebook stock goes down 10%, the market cap of the company will go down, from 1.6 trillion to 1.44 trillion. So stock price signifies, something. And it's the same thing in sports betting. Markets, every book is telling you through their odds what they believe the odds should actually be, right? If books are telling you in this scenario, Bet Online, Caesars, ESPN, all these books have the over 8.5. They're giving you worse odds. They have the line at -120. So these books are telling you through their markets, through their odds, that, hey, we think based on our models, these sports books are multi-billion-dollar companies. They're experts in setting lines. So all these other books are telling you, hey, we think the over is the much more likely outcome, the favored outcome. Whereas FanDuel, their model, they have the under favored. FanDuel's model is telling you, we think the under's favored. We think the under is the more likely outcome. So we have this difference between books and where they're setting prices. So basically, positive EV betting, you're using odds on all these other sports books to find profitable bets on the books you actually use. And a sports book like FanDuel, FanDuel has thousands of lines, probably 100,000 lines up at any given time. There's limitless things you can bet on FanDuel Sportsbook. So essentially, positive EV betting is just saying, hey, show me all the spots where FanDuel's slipping up, where FanDuel's actually offering too much value, where I'm actually getting an edge enough to beat the book, more than the vig or the juice. That's essentially positive EV betting, and we're about to go into it in more detail. So odds mean something, right? That's kind of the core of positive EV betting, profitable sports betting. So for example, if you look at these NBA odds, the Thunder are -285 favorites. They're favored to beat the Nuggets in Game 7. In Game 1 of Knicks-Pacers, the Knicks are -175 favorites. They're also favored to win, but they're less big of favorites, right? Like, odds signify win probability. So I'll give you a simple example is if a team is -900, right? They're a much bigger favorite. That means they're a 9-1 favorite, or the market, right? Sports books, the market, the betting market, sports books, whatever you want to call it. Sports books are saying they're 90% to win the game. -900, 9-1 favorite, 90% to win the game, right? On the other hand, +400, if a team is +400, sports books are saying they're 20% to win, right? They're 4-1 underdogs, so the market is implying they have a 20% win probability. And kind of understanding sportsbook odds is really important to positive EV sports betting. So let's go through an example of positive EV betting. Here's a positive EV bet that I locked in. It's Kent State, kind of random bet, but again, sportsbooks have tens of thousands of lines up. We're trying to zone in on the few rare bets that actually have edge, right? That actually have a positive ROI, which are also called positive EV bets. But anyways, I locked in Kent State +37 at +105 odds on Fliff. Fliff, you can see they're the only sportsbook offering you plus money, plus odds, underdog odds. And I actually played this in a parlay. I gave out this play on Twitter. But regardless, positive EV betting, it works for straight bets. It also works for parlays. So positive EV betting, it works with straight bets and parlays. Like, there's definitely a common misconception. Oh, you can't make money betting on parlays. Parlays are horrible. And that's, in general, for most people, that's going to be true. 97% of people lose money sports betting. So a parlay is just a combination of bets, right? So if you have a negative, let's say 4% ROI on your straight bets, for 2-leg parlays, you're going to have a negative 8% ROI. For 3-leg parlays, you're going to have a negative 12% ROI. So long story short, like, parlays are profitable if your bets are profitable. On the other hand, the flip side of the coin is if you have a 5% ROI on your straight bets, then you're going to have a 10% ROI on 2-leg parlays approximately, 15% on 3-leg parlays, etc. So you absolutely can make money betting on parlays, but again, that's not the point of this video. I've made full-length videos about the math behind parlays and profitable parlay betting strategy. But basically, why did I like this bet? Why is this bet plus EV, positive EV? Kent State plus 37 at plus 105. So what you're going to notice, right, is Fliff is the only book offering plus 105. Every other book is giving you the same odds on Kent State plus 37, as well as Arkansas minus 37, which is the opposite outcome. So for example, on DraftKings, they have this line minus 110, minus 110 for equal and opposite outcomes. So if a sports book has, the same odds on both outcomes, right? Kent State plus 37 and Arkansas minus 37, the sports book is basically saying each outcome is 50-50, right? If they're giving you the same odds on both sides of the market, they're saying it's a 50-50 outcome. So it's the same thing for Pinnacle. Pinnacle has this minus 107, minus 107. Pinnacle is known to be a really sharp, smart sports book as well with, very accurate pricing. So Pinnacle is basically saying this is 50-50. There's a 50% chance Kent State covers, and then there's a 50% chance Arkansas covers. This is 50-50. Nobody knows the future. Everything's about probabilities. So let's say I just bet this as a straight bet. Let's just say instead of parlaying it, I just played for $100 Kent State plus 37 at plus 105 odds. So I'm betting 100 to profit 105. So every other sports book, right, they're giving you the same odds on both sides of the market. They're saying this bet is 50% to win, 50% to lose. So in this case, that's a pretty good deal, right? Like, if I'm winning a bet at underdog odds 50% of the time, I'm going to be profitable, right? Like, the basic math is 50% of the time, I'm winning $105. If Kent State is covering 50% of the time, 50% of the time, I'm going to profit $105. The other 50% of the time, I'm going to lose $100. So, this isn't a guaranteed win. This isn't a lock, but it's a bet with an edge. Half the time I'm winning 105 in profit. The other half the time I'm losing 100. It's kind of like if you were able to flip a coin with a friend, and if head shows up, the coin's 50-50. If head shows up, you get $105. And if tail shows up, you lose $100. That's a no-brainer. You would flip that coin all day long because the coin's 50-50 to land on heads or tails. And when head shows up, you make more money than when you lose when tail shows up. So that would be a no-brainer trade. And obviously, this bet's not a guaranteed win. The same way, if we flip a coin and you can pick heads or tails, I'll give you 105. If, your side of the coin wins, you give me $100 regardless. You're not going to win every single time, but over the course of the long run, right, long term, that coin's going to be 50% to land on heads, tails, so you're going to turn a profit long term. And that's essentially positive EV betting. You're not going to win every bet, but if your bets have an edge, you're still going to have losing streaks, whatever, you're going to win long term. So September of 2024 was my best month sports betting ever. I made over $70,000. I was basically just EV betting. I was just using positive EV betting. I made $70,000 and I still had losing days, right? I still had days where I lost $5,000, $7,000. So this doesn't mean you're going to win every single bet. If a bet has an edge, that doesn't mean it's a guaranteed winner. It simply means the bet has an edge. Just like flipping a coin where you get $105 if you're right and you lose 100 if you're wrong. For a 50-50 coin, that's a no-brainer trade. So that is essentially positive EV betting. We're using the odds on other sports books to tell us the probability our bet wins and then trying to figure out, is this bet profitable or not? So I'm going to run you through an example of a positive EV bet that I locked in. We're going to go through the math, all the nerdy stuff, which I promise, even if you don't like math, it's not that complicated. And if you understand this, it's going to help you make a lot more money betting on sports long term. And then I'm going to get into the nitty gritty, right? What settings do I use on the OddsJam positive EV tool? Like what markets am I betting on? What books am I devigging to? What devig method? Like we're going to get into the nitty gritty about how to set up your positive EV tool to maximize your profits. But here's a bet I just locked in. Jackson Merrill to hit a double at plus 370 odds on FanDuel. So again, ideally you use multiple books. We never know, as sports bettors, which book is going to have the best value on a given day. Sometimes FanDuel has a ton of good bets. Other times, FanDuel's pretty dry and all the opportunities on DraftKings or Caesars. So the more books you use for a lot of reasons, but more books means more profitable bets, ultimately means more money in your pocket. But you can see it's like, okay, FanDuel looks like they're offering really good value at plus 370. Other books have this priced around plus 250. So let's say the market average is about, plus 300 fair odds. We said earlier, I explained earlier, plus 300, that means a 3-to-1 underdog or 25% to win. Right? So if a team's plus 300, they're a 3-to-1 underdog, 25% to win the game. So Jackson Merrill's about 25% to hit a double. But what you can actually do is devig the market. So devigging may sound complicated, but it's actually really simple, right? Devigging, like sports books, they make their money by charging a spread called the vig or the juice. They're kind of like stockbrokers. If you think about a stockbroker will say, hey, I think this stock is worth $10, so I'll be 9 bid, 11 offer. I'll buy it at 9, I'll sell it at 11. And they just make their money. That's how all these trading firms and investment banks make a ton of money, is just through the bid-ask spread by charging a spread around fair value. And it's the same thing on sports books. So this is the most important calculator in sports betting. It's called a no vig odds calculator. And what it does is just removes the vig and tells you the probability both outcomes win. So for example, if I just take the average odds across hundreds of sports books, Jackson Merrill is plus 278 to hit a double, and his under is minus 435. So it's a pretty wide market. He's plus 278 to hit a double, minus 435 to not hit a double. So there's a pretty big spread baked in. So what I want to do is just remove that spread, and that's called, again, devigging the market. So in this case, what this is telling me is Jackson Merrill is 24.55% if you just take a weighted average of all sports books, the average odds across every book. Jackson Merrill is 24.55% to hit a double, which means he's 75.45% to not hit a double. So what that implies is Merrill's fair price, also known as the no vig odds, like the price where you break even, is plus 307. That's the fair price according to the market average of all sports books. This doesn't assume any sports books are sharper or smarter than others. This is just the average price across every book. So basically, we're getting plus 370 on FanDuel. Fair price is plus 307, so we're getting above fair value. This bet is plus EV or profitable. So if Merrill's 24.55% to hit a double, and we're getting plus 370 odds, the expected value of our bet would be 15.39. For my $100, I'm expecting a return of $15. And it's just simple math, right? Assuming the weighted average of sportsbooks is correct, each book is equally smart, equally sharp, which isn't true, but we'll get into that in a bit. This bet, long term, it's not a guaranteed win, right? This bet isn't even favored to win. There's only a 24.55% chance I win, but when I win, I turn $100 into $370 in profit. So 24.55% of the time, I'm winning $370. The other 75.45% of the time, I'm losing my stake of $100. So if you just work out the math, the expected value or the edge of that bet is $15.39 or 15.3% projected ROI EV percentage. So over the course of the long run, placing this bet, I'm gonna make a 15.3% return. Now, in this example, I devigged my market to the weighted average of sportsbooks. But let's say for whatever reason, I'm like, no, I think Caesars is super smart. They're always right on player doubles. I want to devig this market to Caesars Sportsbook specifically. So Caesars had their market plus 262 minus 404. So if I devig that market, fair value is plus 290. Again, according to Caesars, Merrill's fair, the price he should be priced at, is plus 290. I'm getting plus 370 on FanDuel, above fair value, so this bet's plus EV. Merrill, according to Caesars, is 25.63% to hit a double. So, according to Caesars, if Jackson Merrill is 25.6% to hit a double, the EV of my bet would be even higher, 20%. So because sportsbooks have different odds, right? The EV percentage or the, projected return, expected return is going to be different from book to book. And again, like no vig odds, it may be a little confusing if you haven't thought about it before. But if we just go back to that example on Kent State, where I'm betting Kent State at plus 105, basically every book had their market minus 110, minus 110. They're giving you the same price on the over and the under, or both sides of the market. Arkansas minus 37 and Kent State plus 37. They're giving you the same price on both bets, right? So both bets are 50% to win. So if you devig the market, right, the no vig win probability is 50-50, which makes sense. If equal and opposite outcomes both have the same odds, minus 110, minus 110, both teams, or in this case, both sides of the spread are going to be 50-50 outcomes. And the fair price or the no vig odds would be plus 100. On Fliff, we're getting above fair value, plus 105. So this bet is positive EV or has an projected ROI. It's a profitable bet. And that should make sense. So plus 100, the no vig odds or the fair odds is the price you break even at. So if a bet is 50-50 to win or lose, plus 100 is fair, right? Like you think about a coin flip, 50-50 outcome, plus 100 is fair, right? If head shows up, you win 100. If tails, you lose 100. That's a fair trade, right? It's a 50-50 outcome. It's a coin flip. So heads, you win 100. Tails, you lose 100. That's fair value. That's the fair price where long-term, your ROI is going to be zero. You're not going to make money. You're not going to lose money. You're just going to be flat. Right? So essentially, if you're getting above fair value, plus 110 odds, plus 120, plus 105, a coin flip would be profitable, plus EV, you're getting above fair value. If you're getting worse odds than fair value, your bet's negative EV or unprofitable. So if I were getting minus 105, minus 110, minus 120, a coin flip would be a horrible bet. So that's basically the math behind positive EV betting. Again, you don't really, to start positive EV betting, you don't need to understand everything about the math. I think it's helpful for understanding why the strategy works. I'm a big believer that if you want to bet on sports and make money, it's really important to understand, why it works, the math behind it, the strategy behind it, because again, you're going to have some losing days. In September of 2024, which was a month where I made over $70,000, I still had days where I went down 9K. But again, I understand the math. So I know there's going to be some ups and downs, variance, but over the course of the long run, I'm going to make money. And that's basically how I've made, since I started using Pikkit, this bet tracker, how I've made like $700,000 is I really understand the math, the strategy, and I'm fine dealing with variance. So what I'm gonna do here is just show you, you can see there's so many markets here. How do I set up my positive EV settings? Like, what exactly do I do? Do I place all these bets? How do I kind of think about it? Or do I remove certain leagues, certain markets, certain sports? Everything like that I'm gonna go through. And I wanna be clear, positive EV betting, right? This is the main strategy I use. Here you can see my Pikkit Sports account is, it's overall up, but you can see there are some brutal downswings. You're not going to win every single day. It's just like getting a coin flip where you get $105 if it's heads, you lose 100 if it's tails. There's still going to be times that coin shows up tails, 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 and you're going to feel like an idiot, but you just have to trust the process and go through the variance. So first things first, what I highly recommend doing is removing niche markets. Honestly, what I would say is just focus on the main markets. NBA, WNBA, you can include or not include, MLB, NHL, we're unfortunately not in football season, but NFL, college football, college basketball, is I focus on main sports. So if you think about something like, let me actually go back to, let's put in all leagues again. And let's see if there's any super weird leagues. So Liga MX, MLS, like the thing about these sports is they're just less active, less liquid betting markets. They don't get as much volume. So for example, it's like this random bet, Liga MX, like FanDuel's a US company, it's a US sports book. Compared to the MLB, nobody is betting on Liga MX. So when we talk about sports betting and using odds to identify edges, it is important to consider how much action are these books even getting. If you think about an NBA money line or MLB, right? Shohei Ohtani, extremely popular player. There's probably millions of dollars bet on Shohei today. These are very active, liquid betting markets. So the sports books have pretty accurate lines. They have a lot of betting volume. These books are constantly, if I pull up a line movement chart, you can see these books are adjusting odds based on lineup news, where action's coming in, weather, all sorts of stuff. However, for some of these more niche markets that don't get as much betting volume, like Liga MX, these books, just may have a few $1,000s bet. So their models aren't super accurate. It's harder for them to price these games, and you should have less confidence in your edge. So long story short, the first thing I do is, again, just focus on main leagues, professional sports leagues, or college football, college basketball. So the first thing I do, MLB, whatever. Like cricket, I'm not betting on. Boxing, I'm not betting on. UFC, I will bet on. MMA, where is this stuff? Where is UFC, man? Here it is, UFC. But again, I'm not betting on college lacrosse, these niche markets that aren't super active, aren't super liquid, because it's very hard to have high confidence in your edge. And you can kind of see that here. Like if you look at my Pikkit, sure, I play some World Cup bets, college baseball every once in a while, but almost all of my betting volume is on main sports, NHL, tennis I'll play, NFL, NBA, like main sports. So the first thing I do is I just filter main leagues in. I guess tennis, tennis, WTA, ATP are kind of fine. So let me actually just go here. Where is tennis? WTA, and then ATP. So that's kind of the first thing I do, is just focus on the main leagues. The next thing I do is I avoid niche, weird markets. So I'm trying to find a good example. For the same reason, I don't bet on, BBL, Australian Hockey League, Korean ping pong, all these weird sports. You also don't want to bet on niche markets like third inning run line. These books are not getting a lot of betting volume. They're largely just throwing up odds. So again, it's a lot harder if the sports books aren't getting a lot of betting volume. It's hard to have confidence in your edge. So typically what I do, and again, I reset this, date range I usually have on next 7 days. I'm fine. Like some books will post odds for UFC for the upcoming weekend. If there's a really good bet, I want to lock it in. So I'm fine with next 7 days. But obviously, if there's already an NFL bet for next season in September, I don't really want to lock up my money for that long. So I don't even bother doing that. So anyways, in terms of markets, I really try to focus on main markets, run line, team total, the main player props, doubles, hits, money line, stuff like that. So what you can do, again, it's kind of up to you, is you can just avoid them and not bet on them, or you can remove all of these weird markets, just because, again, they're less active betting markets, seventh inning run line, stuff like that. The next thing I do is I like to focus on more narrow odds. So you can see right now I have minus 350 to plus 1150. I mean, sometimes I'll place a home run bet, stuff like that. But long story short, when the markets get wider, it's harder to have as much confidence in your edge. So here, plus 600 on FanDuel, I mean, that looks pretty good compared to Caesars only offering plus 375, but that's a really wide market, right? Like, this is almost 400 cents in juice. It's a very wide market. So the way you can kind of think about it is, let's say you want to sell your house. If someone tells you, hey, your house is worth between $500,000 and $550,000, that's pretty helpful, right? Because if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'll buy your house for $600,000, that's a pretty good deal because you got a narrow range. However, if someone comes to you and says, hey, your house is worth between $200,000 and $1 million, it's kind of useless. If someone comes to you and is like, hey, I'll pay $600,000 for your house, you don't really know if that's a good deal or not, because the estimate you got was your house was worth between $200,000 and $1 million. It's too wide of a range. So as the odds increase, right, and you get more into these tail outcomes, what you're going to notice is, it's a lot harder to know because this market is so wide. FanDuel seems to be offering really good value at plus 600, but it's such a wide market that it's just hard to know. And again, there's so many bets that are profitable. There's no reason to not have high confidence, high certainty in the value of your bet. So what I often do is minus 400 to plus 400. However, during football, NBA season, when there's so many sports going on, sometimes I'll narrow this even more to like minus 200, plus 200. I just want to focus on tight market width. And minimum market width, I set at 1. Maximum, typically, I have around, 75. It's kind of related to min-max odds because, again, as the odds increase and you get more into these tail outcomes, these books charge wider and wider markets. But typically, I'm doing something like this, right? So min-max odds, minus 200 to plus 200. I'll increase that a bit, minus 300, plus 300, when there's less sports going on because I want to see more opportunities. Percentage, I don't even set. This is just what sports books you use. So again, I'm in Virginia, which is a great state. There's tons of sports books. So just put in all the books you use. I mean, there's no secret sauce here. Sports, we already kind of did with leagues. So that's not even worth talking about. And then let's go to Dvig settings. For Dvig settings, okay, some people will be like, oh, Pinnacle sharp, FanDuel sharp, Circa sharp. What Dvig setting should I use? I recommend just keeping the OddsJam recommended book weights and then using worst case, right? This is ultra conservative, but why do you want to use OddsJam recommended weights? Let's kind of start there. And the reason is, I mean, there are hundreds of sports books, right? Like, you have hundreds of data points. Pinnacle is known to be a pretty sharp book. Circa is known to be a pretty sharp book. OddsJam is reading in data from hundreds of sports books, right? So you don't just want to look at the market for one specific book. Even though Pinnacle, Circa, and BetOnline are pretty sharp, I don't just want to look at Pinnacle's market. There's other data points. I want to factor in all books. So OddsJam, back tests these every book, what books are sharper for specific markets, everything like that. And that's why you want to I recommend using OddsJam recommended book weights. You want to use every single sports book, and you can kind of read about that here. So certain books are smarter, sharper, more active for certain markets. So for example, Pinnacle is extremely sharp for mainline markets, money lines, run lines, totals. But they get less action in terms of player props. So other books are actually just as sharp as Pinnacle for player prop betting markets. So ideally, you're looking at kind of everything. So again, remove the niche markets, whatever. And that's basically what I do. The reason I set worst case Dvig method, usually when I'm betting, is, again, like we kind of explained no vig odds. So where's the calculator again? Is, right, like ways to devig markets, figure out fair odds. This is the most important calculator in sports betting, so I really recommend reading, the text on the site about no vig odds here. But the reason I used worst case is there's a few different devig methods. Okay, there's a few different ways you can devig markets. So like here, there's 3 main ways you can devig markets. There's multiplicative, additive, and power. There's 3 different formulas. They're all roughly the same, to be clear. They're all roughly the same, but like they're slightly different formulas. The reason I use worst case is to be ultra conservative. I only want to see a bet if it's profitable plus EV to every possible devig method. Again, there's so many possible profitable bets. There's no reason to have any uncertainty. It should be profitable to every book, every devig method. And this helps me zone in on the few rare bets that have incredible value, the best possible value on FanDuel. So for example, Clayton Kershaw over 3.5 strikeouts. This is minus 128 on FanDuel. Let's bet this real quick before the game starts. So this bet I already placed. I talked about it at the start of the video. But you can see FanDuel's offering incredible value, minus 128. Circa, a really sharp book. They have the over as a much bigger favorite at minus 150. So if we devig Circa's market, minus 150 plus 120, the fair price is minus 132. We're getting minus 128, so that's better than fair value. This bet's plus EV. So this is a great bet. Then I typically just hide it. And now here we just have this bet for tomorrow. But again, I already got it locked in, so they're gonna tell me max wager 0. So right now there's only one bet that looks insanely good on FanDuel, which again is why I recommend using multiple books like ESPN Bet. ESPN Bet has a really good play on Dort, plus 120. This looks incredible. So again, the more books you use, the better. One thing I wanted to mention about ProfitX and Novig is you really want to consider liquidity. So for example, this is kind of, unique, but basically on these betting exchanges, ProfitX and Novig, where's Novig? Let's see if we can find it. So ProfitX and Novig, these 2 books, right, they're peer-to-peer betting sites. So long story short, on these peer-to-peer betting sites, it is important, in my opinion, that you consider how much liquidity is available. So OddsJam has one-click bet, which makes it really easy. Like this will take me right to Aaron Gordon PRAs. So you can see there's a lot of liquidity. If I can bet, these peer-to-peer betting sites tell you how much you can bet. So for example, here on ProfitX, they say liquidity available 357. So basically I can bet, 757. I can bet $757 on Aaron Gordon's over at plus 136 odds. I'm not going to take this on ProfitX. The reason is somebody is taking the other side, right? If somebody is offering $750 on Aaron Gordon's over, that's a lot of money. I mean, it's not that much money, but it's not a small position. So this most likely is a sharper better, right? A syndicate even possibly, because they're offering, granted, again, this isn't that much liquidity. However, something like this, right, I'm fine with. There's only $68.50 in liquidity. This is most likely some other square bettor who uses ProfitX and Dvag, so I don't really care. I'm fine placing this bet. Dude, take the bet. I don't know why they have so many problems verifying location. I may have to do it on my phone, but I don't have my phone connected. But again, like if somebody is offering, $68.50, that's most likely a small bettor, a recreational bettor. I'm not too scared of them. Whereas if this said $68,000, that means someone's trying to take the opposite side, the under 223 at minus 105, because they're offering the over 223 at plus 105, which means this person is trying to bet the under. So now I can lock it in. Over 223 at plus 105 odds. ProfitX charges a 3% fee. There's no limits on this book. ProfitX and Dvag are peer-to-peer betting exchanges, so there's no limits, nothing like that. You can bet all the liquidity you want. In this case, there was just $68.50. So ProfitX makes money. They charge a 3% fee. OddsJam already automatically factors that in, right? So 3% worse than plus 105 is plus 102, which is exactly what OddsJam has it at. But long story short, this is a great bet. However, what I was going to say is if this had, instead of only $68 in liquidity, 68,000, I'm not going to take it because somebody clearly has a super strong opinion, most likely a sharp or a syndicate, and they're trying to take a huge position on the opposite outcome, the under 223 at minus 105 odds. You don't want to bet against really smart people, right? Against syndicates. You want to bet against these square recreational books like FanDuel. So here's another bet. The sports betting market's always open. These lines are always moving around. Fernandez, minus 136, absolutely beautiful. All these other books, it's Arbitrage to Caesars. All these other books have the over as a much bigger favorite. Third quarter total points, again, that's kind of a niche market, so I should actually filter it out. Third quarter total points isn't getting a ton of betting volume. So third quarter total points, I'll just kind of filter out. These two bets I already got locked in. And another thing I wanted to mention is I do like to use the OddsJam arbitrage tool to find bets. So the reason is whenever two books have such different odds that I can bet the over on one book, the under on a different book to guarantee a profit, I know one of the two bets has to be profitable or plus EV. So here I can get Bridges' over at plus 102, his under at plus 100. Right? I could bet both of these. That's arbitrage betting, right? I'm getting plus money on both his over and his under. So I could bet the over on FanDuel, the under on ESPN bet. And if I do it in the proper proportion, so if I want to bet $500 on FanDuel, this tells me bet 505 on ESPN bet, and you'll make $5 risk free. So one of these two bets has to be plus EV because I could bet both to guarantee a risk-free profit. So right now it's honestly pretty late, at night. So I don't actually see a ton of arbitrage bets, but regardless, that's kind of how I set up my EV tool in my settings. So this play I already locked in. FanDuel's the only book with the under favored. All the other books have the over heavily favored. So again, min-max odds, minus 200 to plus 200. Focus on main leagues. Focus on main markets. Date range next 7 days. Market width 1 to 75. Dvig, worst case, be ultra conservative. OddsJam recommended weights. You want to consider every possible sports book.